people around me can't stop debating and sharing their thoughts about this, and honestly, I don't even know how to process what happened. My name is Lena. I'm 20 years old and I've been living at home for a couple of years since I graduated high school. But for the longest time I've been stuck in this weird dynamic with my family and I'm just so done with it. I have two younger siblings, Ethan, 17, and Mia, 14, and as far back as I can remember they've always been spoiled. My parents have always been super strict with me, everything from chores to expectations about my future, but for some reason they let Ethan and Mia get away with literally anything. They never have to do chores, they never get any consequences. Meanwhile, I'm over here working a full-time job and coming home to do all the housework every single day. I'll give you a quick rundown of how things usually go at home. I wake up early to go to work, then I come back at night exhausted. But the moment I walk through that door, the expectation is that I'm going to start cooking dinner, clean the kitchen, do laundry, and sometimes even take care of whatever mess my siblings leave behind. Ethan and Mia, on the other hand, sit around watching TV or playing on their phones. They're literally never asked to help. I've had enough. The situation really blew up last Saturday. I had just gotten off a brutal 9-hour shift at my job. My feet were killing me, I hadn't eaten all day and all I wanted, literally all I needed, was to lie down for 5 minutes. But the second I walked through the door, I was hit with the unmistakable stench of leftover food. I sighed, already knowing what was waiting for me. Sure enough, Ethan's dirty plate was sitting smack in the middle of the coffee table, surrounded by crumbs. Ethan, 17M, has this infuriating habit of leaving his mess everywhere. Plates, wrappers, empty soda cans, you name it, and guess what? No one ever says anything. No one ever makes him clean up after himself. At this point, I usually just ignore it because honestly, I don't have the energy to fight over it anymore. But this time, I couldn't do it. I walked past the plate, forcing myself to stay calm when, of course, I heard my mom's voice from the kitchen. Lena, can you come in here and clean up the table? I froze. Of course it was me. Ethan left his plate again, she called out, like it was just a given that I'd clean up after him. In my head, I was already boiling. Why is it always me? Why am I the one cleaning up after everyone? Why does no one else have responsibilities in this house? Still, I tried to keep my cool and walked into the kitchen. Mom, I've been at work all day. I'm exhausted. Ethan can clean up after himself for once. I wasn't even trying to hide my frustration anymore, and she did not take it well. Lena, you're the oldest. You should be setting an example. Just clean it up. You're acting like it's such a big deal. I stood there staring at her, absolutely stunned. Are you serious? I'm sick of this. I'm not the household servant. I take care of everything around here while Ethan and Mia sit around doing absolutely nothing. Why is it always me? Why can't they lift a finger just once? Mom shot me that annoyed look, the one she always gives when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Just clean it up and move on. I felt my chest tighten as the frustration boiled inside me. This isn't just about a plate, Mom. It's about how you've treated me for years. I work all day, I come home exhausted, and somehow, I'm still the only one doing everything while Ethan and Mia get to lounge around. I've had enough. Her expression hardened. Stop being dramatic. You're 20, Lena. You're old enough to help out without throwing a tantrum. I let out a sharp breath, barely holding back the anger clawing at my throat. Oh, so now I'm an adult. Funny, because you don't seem to expect them to act like adults. I'm the only one who's ever expected to pick up the slack. I waved a hand toward Ethan and Mia, sprawled out in the living room, completely oblivious to what was happening. This is not some huge injustice. Mom snapped, her voice laced with irritation. You should be thankful you even have a place to stay rent-free. Instead of whining, maybe you should appreciate what you have. That was it. Final straw. The frustration, the exhaustion, the crushing realization that this cycle would never change. It all hit me at once. I'm done. The words slipped out before I even fully processed them. I'm leaving. Mom froze, her face shifting from exasperation to shock. What? You're not serious? Where are you even going to go? I'll figure it out. I snatched my car keys off the counter that I've been saving for months. That I don't need to put up with this anymore. My heart pounded, but for the first time in years I felt something new, relief. Mom called after me, her voice rising in desperation, shouting something about how I didn't have to do this. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already gone. I couldn't turn back now. There was no way I was going to keep putting myself through this. I refused to stay in a house where I was treated like I didn't exist. The moment I stepped outside, I pulled the door shut behind me with more force than I intended, but I didn't care. As I slid into the driver's seat, A wave of relief washed over me. I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night, but it didn't matter. I just knew that staying in that house for another second wasn't an option. A strange mix of fear and freedom settled in my chest as I pulled out of the driveway. The silence in the car felt heavier than usual, but for the first time in forever, it wasn't suffocating, it was mine. I drove around aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my mind, letting the streetlights blur past me. I still had no plan, but the thought of going back home wasn't even a consideration. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe and just sat there, scrolling through my phone. A few minutes later, I started looking up places for rent. It wasn't easy. Most listings were either too expensive or in neighborhoods I wasn't comfortable with. But after a few calls, I finally found something reasonable. A modest one-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of the city. The rent was a little higher than I had hoped, but I could make it work. More than anything, the idea of not having to wake up to a pile of dirty dishes, or hear my mom constantly telling me I was ungrateful, made it worth every penny. The next day I signed the lease, and by the end of the week I had packed up and moved out for good. I took only what I needed: my clothes, a few pieces of furniture, my work gear, and a couple of sentimental items. Locked up my old room for the last time. An odd sense of finality settled in. No more waking up to unreasonable demands, no more being dismissed as overly sensitive. The first few days in my new place were the most liberating I had felt in years. The silence, once unfamiliar, became comforting. I could come and go as I pleased, and for the first time, no one was there to tell me how I should be living my life. I cooked whenever I felt like it, and if I didn't feel like doing anything, I didn't have to. The apartment was small, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. As the days passed, I began to settle into a rhythm: work, the gym, a bit of Netflix in the evenings, and slowly I started feeling like myself again. I still kept in touch with a few friends, but the more time I spent away from home, the clearer it became just how toxic my family dynamic had been. I no longer had to bear the weight of everyone else's responsibilities. I was free in a way I had never been before. But then, about a week into living on my own, the calls started. At first, it was just a single voicemail from my mom. Her tone was laced with concern, but not the kind that actually meant she cared about how I was doing. No, this was something else entirely. "Lena, we need you to come back home. The house is a mess, you left things everywhere and no one is doing the chores. Your dad's been complaining, and Ethan and Mia don't even know how to clean up after themselves. Please just come back for a little while, it's getting out of hand. We really need your help." As I listened, a wave of irritation surged through me. Oh God. They had never cared about whether I was helping before. They had never once asked if I was okay, what I wanted, or if I even needed a break. But now that the house was a disaster and the chores weren't magically getting done, suddenly they wanted me back. I didn't respond. The next day I got a text from Ethan, short and to the point. "Lena, Mom says you need to come home and help out. The house is falling apart. Do you even care about us anymore?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, itching to fire back with something sarcastic. But instead I sighed, set my phone down, and shook my head. Not once did they ask how I was doing. Not once did they check if I was okay. They didn't care about that, they just wanted their housekeeper back. I ignored the message, but the notifications kept coming. Over the next few days they all tried to reach me. My mom, my dad, Ethan, even Mia. Texts, voicemails, missed calls. But the message was always the same. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me. They weren't reaching out to apologize or to understand why I left. They just wanted me to come back and take care of the things they couldn't be bothered to do themselves. And as their desperation grew, their messages became more transparent. From Mom: "Lena, please come back and clean the kitchen. It's a disaster." From Mia: "Lena, we haven't seen you in so long. We miss you. Oh, and also, can you come pick up your laundry?" From Ethan: "Lena, seriously, what's wrong with you? Mom says you're being selfish. Just help us out." I didn't know what frustrated me more: the fact that they were pretending to miss me, or the fact that they still didn't get it. I wasn't their maid. I had spent years sacrificing my time, my energy, my well-being to keep that house in order. And now that I wasn't there, it was finally falling apart. And instead of realizing how much they had taken me for granted, they just wanted me back to fix it. It was never about me, it was always about the chores. Then one night, after yet another voicemail from my mom, I hit my breaking point. I had just gotten home after an exhausting shift, finally sinking into the couch, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace when my phone buzzed again. I already knew what it was before even looking. Another demand, another guilt trip. This time I couldn't hold back. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not coming back." There was silence on the other end before she spoke, her tone already defensive. "What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. The house is a disaster, your dad is losing his mind." I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Mom. I'm the only one who ever did handle it. For years I did everything and I'm done. If you and Dad want the house clean, maybe it's time you actually start parenting your kids and teaching them how to take care of themselves. I'm not cleaning up after them anymore." Her voice sharpened, filled with irritation. "Well, fine. I guess you don't care about this family anymore." I exhaled slowly, feeling years of guilt start to unravel. "No, Mom, I care about myself now. And I'm not going to let you guilt trip me into coming back just so you can have someone to do everything for you. I'm done." The call ended with her angrily telling me I was being selfish. It should have stung, but instead, all I felt was relief. I was never going back to that. The next week passed in a blur of work, gym sessions, and quiet nights alone in my apartment. Finally, on my own terms, for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. No more walking into a house filled with expectations, guilt trips, and never-ending chores. My space was my own, and I didn't have to answer to anyone. But of course, my parents weren't about to let me go that easily. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. "Lena, this is getting ridiculous. We've been having to clean the whole house by ourselves. You need to come home and help us, or we won't be able to keep up anymore." I stared at the text, rolling my eyes. Same old speech, different wording. But this time there was a new level of urgency. They were getting desperate. The pressure was obvious, and for a split second I thought about ignoring it. But I couldn't help myself. I had to say something. So I replied, keeping my tone as even as possible. "I'm not coming back, Dad. I'm not cleaning up after everyone anymore. It's not my job to keep the house running." I sent the message and waited. Hours passed without a response, and for a brief moment I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to understand. That they were realizing I wasn't their personal servant anymore. Just as I was about to relax, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Ethan. My frustration spiked, but I picked up, hoping to shut the conversation down quickly. "Hey," he started, his voice calm but carrying an edge I didn't like. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? You know this isn't just about the chores, right? Mom and Dad are struggling. They need help and you're just abandoning them." I rubbed my temples, already exhausted by a conversation that hadn't even fully begun. "Ethan, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm done being treated like I'm the only one capable of doing anything. You and Mia are old enough to start handling your own responsibilities. Mom and Dad should have been teaching you that. But you could help," he pushed, irritation creeping into his tone. "You could just come back for a little while, just until things settle down. It's not like you're doing anything important over there anyway." That last part hit a nerve. "I'm working. Ethan, I'm actually doing something with my life. I'm not just sitting around waiting for someone else to clean up after me. But you? You spend your days glued to a screen, leaving your mess everywhere. Then you expect someone else to deal with it." He let out a sharp laugh, like I had just told the funniest joke in the world. "Yeah, well, not all of us have jobs, do we? You act like you're some big shot just because you work a little. Mom and Dad have enough stress without you making things worse." I felt my patience snap. "You know what? I'm done talking about this. You, Mom and Dad, can keep playing your little guilt games, but I'm not your scapegoat anymore. I'm not coming back." I ended the call before he could say another word, my heart pounding. I barely had time to set my phone down before it buzzed again. This time it was from my mom. I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity got the best of me. "Lena, we need to talk. You need to come home. Your father is having a breakdown and the house is in complete chaos. You're not being fair. Please just come back and help us." I stared at the message, my fingers tightening around the phone as a wave of anger surged through me. A breakdown? The same people who had spent years breaking me down were now suddenly falling apart? I didn't respond, but the weight of their expectations pressed against me like a vice, digging under my skin. I hated it. That night I left my apartment and went for a walk, trying to clear my head. As I wandered through the quiet streets, I let my mind replay the past. The way my parents had treated me, how they had reduced me to nothing more than a live-in maid, How they expected me to be grateful for whatever scraps of love they threw my way, while Ethan and Mia got away with doing nothing, and now I was paying the price for finally standing up for myself. By the time I got back to my apartment, something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about cleaning the house anymore. This was about my independence. My family had always expected me to bend to their will, to sacrifice my own happiness for their convenience. But I had done enough. I wasn't going to let them guilt me back into that life. Again, a few days later, the calls started again. This time it wasn't just one voicemail or text, it was relentless. My mom called, leaving 5 messages in a row, each one more frantic than the last. "Lena, we really need you to come back. This is getting out of hand. Your dad can't handle it alone. Ethan and Mia refuse to do anything. You're the only one who can help." A few hours later, another message. "Please, Lena, I'm begging you. Come back. We'll make it right. You won't have to do everything. Just stay for a while. We're desperate. You're the only one who can fix this." The desperation in her voice was unmistakable, but beneath it I could still hear the same manipulation. This wasn't about me. It was never about me. They just wanted their unpaid worker back. I let the messages pile up, each one a stark reminder of how much I had done for them, how much of myself I had sacrificed for their comfort. And now? They were scrambling without me, but I wasn't going back. Then another call, this time from Ethan. "Seriously? You're just going to ignore us? You're letting the house fall apart because you're too stubborn to help? That's pathetic." I let it go to voicemail. I was done, but as much as I tried to shut them out, I could still feel them lurking in the background of my mind. Their words, their demands, their guilt-tripping. It clung to me like a shadow, a weight I couldn't quite shake. The pressure to return, to fix everything, was mounting, but I couldn't let them drag me back down. I had finally broken free. I wasn't going back. Not until they understood what they had done to me. A few days passed after my mom's last desperate message. I had made my choice, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. Some part of me needed closure, needed to put an end to this for good. So I made the decision. I was going back, not to fix things for them, but to make sure they knew I was done. I threw on an old hoodie and jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove to my parents' house. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded. The house looked the same, but nothing about it felt familiar anymore. This wasn't home. It was a battlefield. I took a deep breath, walked up to the front door, and knocked once before pushing it open. Without waiting for an answer, from inside I could hear my dad's voice, chatting with Ethan and Mia in the kitchen. Then I stepped inside, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. The stale, heavy air of a place that had been neglected. A house that no longer felt lived in but merely occupied. I didn't bother with pleasantries. As I walked into the kitchen, my parents turned to me, their eyes widening in surprise. "Lena, you're back." My mom's face lit up with relief. Dad stood. "Finally, things are out of control." Ethan and Mia barely looked up, lost in their own worlds. They expected me to step back into my old role, the fixer. I took a breath. "No, I'm not here to rescue you." Confusion flickered across their faces. "What do you mean?" Mom asked. "We need you." "No, Mom. You need me to clean up after you. You need me to fix everything because you refuse to." "I've done all the chores for years while Ethan and Mia do nothing, but I'm done." Silence. My dad shifted, ready to argue. "I've been holding everything together while you all sit back. I won't do it anymore." I gestured at the kitchen. Dirty dishes, overflowing trash, food stains, all the chores no one else would do. "This is what you wanted me to come back for. This is what you won't deal with." Mom hesitated. "We've been busy, your dad's sick, and..." "No excuses. You've used me for years. It's time you take responsibility." I turned to Ethan and Mia. "You're old enough to do your own chores. Mom and Dad should be teaching you, not dumping it all on me." Dad's face darkened. "No one forced you to help." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You expected it, and I'm done." "Wow, dramatic," Ethan muttered. I scoffed. "I've done every chore in this house, while you two did nothing. None of you cared." I met my parents' eyes. "I'm not coming back. Figure it out yourselves." Mom's lip quivered. "Lena, please, we can fix this." I turned, walked out, and shut the door behind me, finally free.